The call came on a Tuesday afternoon, right in the middle of the most boring meeting of my life. I was sitting in a conference room at the Chesapeake Maritime Museum in St. Michaels, Maryland, listening to our development director explain the quarterly donor retention metrics for the third time when my phone buzzed against my thigh. I glanced at the screen under the table, unknown number, local area code, and almost sent it to voicemail. Something made me step out. Hello. Good afternoon. Am I speaking with Natalie Graves? Yes, this is she. Ms. Graves, my name is Patricia Hollowell. I'm the branch manager at First Regional Bank on Goldsboro Street in Easton. I'm calling because we've received some documentation regarding your account that I need to verify with you directly. I leaned against the wall outside the conference room, watching a group of tourists photograph the replica skipjack in the harbor below. The late afternoon sun was turning the water into hammered gold, and somewhere in the distance, I could hear the cry of gulls fighting over scraps near the crab shack on the pier. What kind of documentation? There was a pause. The kind of pause that carries weight. Ma'am, are you aware that a death certificate bearing your name was filed with our office this morning? I laughed. Not because it was funny, because my brain couldn't process what she'd said. The sound came out strange, almost strangled, and I pressed my free hand against the warm wood of the building's siding to steady myself. I'm sorry, what? A death certificate, Patricia repeated carefully. It was submitted along with a petition for access to your safety deposit box. The individual claims to be your next of kin and has provided documentation asserting that you passed away 6 days ago. The world tilted slightly. I put my hand on the wall more firmly now, feeling the rough grain of the cedar shake beneath my palm. Through the window behind me, I could see my colleagues still sitting around the conference table, nodding at whatever the development director was saying, completely unaware that someone had just tried to erase me from existence. I'm not dead, I said. It came out flat, almost absurd. Obviously. I'm aware of that now, ma'am. That's why I'm calling. We have protocols in place for situations like this, verification procedures that we follow before granting access to any deceased customer's assets. Your phone number was on file as a primary contact, so I called to confirm. Who? I stopped. Swallowed. My throat felt suddenly dry, like I'd been breathing dust. Who submitted the death certificate? Another pause. Longer this time. Ma'am, I'm not able to disclose that information over the phone. Bank policy requires that we protect the privacy of all parties involved in any account-related matter. But I can tell you that the individual is currently in our branch, waiting in our private conference room while we complete the verification process. My heart was pounding now, not with fear, with something colder, recognition. The kind of recognition that comes when you've been waiting for a blow to land and finally feel it connect. Is she still there? I asked. Yes, ma'am. She's waiting for the documents to be processed. She was told there would be a delay due to the size of the request. Don't let her leave. I was already walking toward the parking lot, my heels clicking against the museum's wooden boardwalk. A family with 2 small children stepped aside to let me pass, and the father gave me a curious look, probably wondering why a woman in business casual was practically running toward the parking lot like her life depended on it. Maybe it did. Ms. Graves, I should inform you that we've already contacted our security team and placed a hold on all activity related to your accounts. We take document fraud very seriously. Additionally, I've flagged your file for review by our compliance department, and they'll be conducting a full audit of any recent activity. Good, I said. That's good, because I'm about 20 minutes away, and I'd like to see who tried to bury me. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. Ms. Graves, Patricia said carefully, I want to be clear about something. When you arrive, I'd recommend allowing our security team to handle the initial interaction. These situations can become volatile. I understand, I said. But I need to see who did this. I need to look her in the face. I didn't realize until after I hung up that I'd said her. Some part of me already knew. The drive from St. Michael's to Easton takes about 15 minutes if you follow the speed limit and don't hit any traffic near the bridge. I made it in 11, my hands tight on the steering wheel of my Subaru Outback, the same car I'd driven for 6 years because I never saw the point in upgrading when something still worked. First Regional Bank sat on a corner lot downtown, a two-story brick building with green shutters and white trim that tried very hard to look like it had been there since colonial times. In reality, it had been built in 1987, but this was the Eastern Shore. Everything tried to look older than it was. I parked in the small lot behind the building and sat in my car for exactly 30 seconds, breathing. The air conditioning hummed. A sparrow landed on the hood, pecked at something invisible, and flew away. Through the windshield, I could see the back entrance of the bank, a plain metal door with a security camera mounted above it, the red light blinking steadily. In that half-minute of stillness, I ran through every person in my life who might have done this. It wasn't a long list. My parents were dead, Dad from a heart attack when I was 22, collapsing in the garage while trying to fix the lawnmower, gone before the ambulance arrived. Mom from ovarian cancer 4 years later, a slow fade that left me hollow in ways I still couldn't fully describe. No siblings. No husband, not anymore. That chapter had ended 5 years ago with signed papers and a profound sense of relief. A handful of close friends, none of whom would have any reason to declare me dead, and none of whom even knew the details of my finances. That left family. And in my family meant one person, my cousin Bridget. Bridget Mahoney was 3 years older than me, the only daughter of my mother's older sister, and the only relative I had left who shared my blood. We'd grown up together in Talbot County, spent summers crabbing off the docks in Oxford, learned to shuck oysters at the same table, attended each other's weddings, hers to a real estate developer named Kyle who always smiled a little too wide, mine to a man I'd rather not discuss. We hadn't spoken in 8 months. Not since the reading of our grandmother's will. Grandma Dorothea died last October at the age of 89. She went quickly, which was a mercy. A stroke in her sleep, discovered the next morning by her housekeeper, Maria, who had worked for her for 23 years and wept at the funeral like she was losing her own mother. Grandma was a complicated woman. Stern, private, deeply suspicious of anyone who hadn't been born on the Eastern Shore. She had opinions about everything, politics, religion, the proper way to season a crab pot, and she shared them freely whether you asked or not. She could be cold, judgmental, impossible to please. But she loved me in her own quiet way. When I was 12, she taught me how to identify real pearls by rubbing them against my teeth. Fake ones feel smooth, she said, pressing a strand into my palm. Real ones have grit. Remember that. Anything worth having has a little grit to it. When I was 19 and my father died, she drove 3 hours to sit with me in silence because she knew I didn't want to talk. She just sat there in her black dress, hands folded in her lap, present without demanding anything. That was her way of saying I love you. When I was 25 and going through my divorce, she let me live in her guest cottage for 6 months without ever asking why. She left meals on the porch, crab soup, cornbread, the lemon cake she made every Sunday, and she never once knocked on my door to check on me. She trusted me to come out when I was ready. And when she died, she left me everything. The house in Easton, a 3-story Victorian on Washington Street with a wraparound porch and a garden she'd tended for 60 years. The land in Trapp, 47 acres of wetland and timber that had been in our family since 1891. The brokerage accounts, a portfolio of blue-chip stocks and municipal bonds she'd accumulated over decades of careful saving. And the antique jewelry collection. That collection was Grandma's pride. Victorian mourning brooches with woven hair compartments. Edwardian sapphire rings in platinum settings. Art Deco diamond clips from the 1920s that she'd acquired piece by piece from estate sales and auctions across the mid-Atlantic. Georgian seed pearl necklaces. A cameo collection that spanned 3 centuries. All of it kept in a safety deposit box at First Regional Bank because she didn't trust home safes, didn't trust insurance companies, and definitely didn't trust anyone who might come into her house while she was away. The collection was appraised at $1.2 million. Bridget received a set of Haviland china that had belonged to our great-grandmother and a check for $15,000. She did not take it well. The scene at the lawyer's office is burned into my memory with a clarity that surprises me even now. Theodore Marsh, Esquire, had been Grandma's attorney for 30 years. His office was on Dover Street, above a bakery that made the best sticky buns on the shore, and the whole building always smelled like cinnamon and rising dough. That smell felt obscene that day, too sweet, too warm for what was about to happen. Bridget arrived with Kyle, both of them dressed in expensive black like they were attending a state funeral rather than a will reading. She hugged me when she walked in, but the hug was stiff, performative, and her eyes kept darting to Theodore's desk where the documents waited. Theodore read the will in a measured tone, pausing at each bequest to ensure we understood. The charitable donations, the gifts to longtime employees, the specific items left to friends and distant relatives. And then he reached the residuary clause. To my granddaughter, Natalie Elise Graves, I leave the remainder of my estate, including but not limited to the real property located at 847 Washington Street, Easton, Maryland. The real property located at Parcel 127, Trapp, Maryland. All financial accounts held in my name, and the contents of safety deposit box number 4471 at First Regional Bank, Easton Branch. Bridget's face didn't move, but her hands did. They clenched in her lap, knuckles going white against the black fabric of her dress. Theodore continued reading, the standard legal language about executor duties, tax provisions, contingencies, but I wasn't listening anymore. I was watching my cousin's jaw tighten, her breathing shallow, her eyes fixed on a point somewhere beyond the wall. When Theodore finished, there was a long silence. Then Bridget spoke. "This is insane." Her voice was low at first, controlled, but I could hear the tremor beneath it. I'm her actual granddaughter. Her daughter's daughter. I'm the one who visited her every Sunday for years. I'm the one who drove her to doctor's appointments, sat with her during her cataract surgery, organized her medication when she got confused about the dosages. And she leaves everything to her. She pointed at me, without looking at me. Theodore cleared his throat. "Mrs. Mahoney, I understand this is difficult. But Mrs. Dorothea Graves was very clear about her wishes. This will was drafted 5 years ago, reviewed annually, and confirmed by your grandmother in writing as recently as last March. There's no ambiguity. There has to be a mistake," Bridget said. Or undue influence. That's a thing, right? Undue influence? She must have manipulated her somehow. Grandma wasn't in her right mind at the end. She was confused, forgetful. Your grandmother was evaluated by her physicians 6 months before her death, Theodore said gently. The evaluation confirmed that she was mentally competent and capable of making her own decisions. I have the documentation here if you'd like to review it. Bridget stood up so fast her chair nearly toppled. "This isn't over," she said. "I'm going to contest this. I'm going to get a lawyer, a real lawyer, and we're going to prove that this will is invalid. Grandma would never have done this. She loved me. She promised me." She stopped, pressed her lips together. Kyle put a hand on her arm. "Bridget, let's go." "She promised me the jewelry," Bridget said, ignoring him. Her eyes were wet now, but the tears seemed more angry than sad. "When I was a little girl, she showed me the pieces in that box and she said, 'Someday, Bridget, this will be yours.' She said that. She promised."
I didn't respond.
There was nothing I could say that would help. "And now you get everything," Bridget continued, turning to face me fully for the first time. "You, who barely visited. You, who couldn't be bothered to come to Sunday dinners. You, who showed up at the end like some kind of..." "Bridget." Kyle's voice was firmer now. "We're leaving." He guided her toward the door, one hand on her back, steering her away from a confrontation that was already spiraling beyond recovery. But at the threshold, she stopped.
Turned.
Looked at me with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. Not anger, not grief, but something colder. Something that had been waiting beneath the surface for years, maybe decades, and had finally found its moment to emerge. "You don't deserve any of it," she said. "And one day you're going to lose it all." The door closed behind her. Theodore sighed and began gathering his papers. "I'm sorry you had to witness that," he said. "Contested wills bring out the worst in people. But I want you to know, your grandmother's wishes were clear, her documentation is impeccable, and any challenge will fail." I nodded, but I wasn't really listening. I was thinking about the look in Bridget's eyes. The absolute certainty. The promise. One day, you're going to lose it all. I thought she meant karma. I thought she meant the universe would somehow correct what she perceived as an injustice. I didn't think she meant she would forge a death certificate and try to rob me while I was still breathing. Bridget did contest the will. She hired a litigation attorney from Baltimore, a man named Garrett Wilkes who drove a Mercedes and charged $600 an hour, and filed a challenge based on undue influence and diminished capacity.
She lost.
The judge reviewed the medical evaluations, the attorney's notes, the witnesses who had been present when Grandma signed, and the annual confirmation letters she had sent to Theodore Marsh reaffirming her wishes. The ruling was decisive. The will was valid. The distribution would proceed as written. Bridget filed an appeal. She lost again. She demanded a forensic audit of Grandma's accounts, claiming I had somehow manipulated her into changing beneficiaries, redirecting funds, hiding assets. The auditor spent 3 months combing through bank statements, tax records, and investment accounts. He found nothing. The estate was settled. The house was transferred to my name. The brokerage accounts were consolidated. And the safety deposit box, box number 4471, containing $1.2 million in antique jewelry, remained exactly where it had always been, waiting for me to decide what to do with it.
I hadn't opened it yet.
I wasn't sure I was ready. And then, 8 months after the will was finalized, my phone rang in a conference room in St. Michael's, and a woman named Patricia Hollowell told me I was dead. The bank lobby was quiet when I walked in. A few customers stood at the teller windows, filling out deposit slips or waiting for transactions to process. Soft jazz played from hidden speakers, the kind of inoffensive background music designed to make people feel calm while they handed over their money. The air smelled faintly of coffee from a machine near the waiting area and the industrial cleaner they used on the marble floors. I approached the reception desk, aware that my heart was pounding harder than it should have been. A young man in a blue blazer looked up with a professional smile. "Welcome to First Regional. How can I help you today?" "I'm here to see Patricia Hollowell. She's expecting me." His smile flickered, just for a moment, and I knew he'd been briefed. He picked up the phone, murmured something I couldn't hear, and nodded. "She'll be right out. If you'd like to have a seat." "I'll stand." He nodded again, uncertain, and went back to his computer. A moment later, a woman emerged from a hallway to my left. She was in her late 50s, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a low bun and reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. She wore a navy blazer over a cream blouse, and her shoes were practical, low heels, the kind a woman wears when she expects to be on her feet for hours. "Miss Graves," she said, extending her hand. "Yes. I'm Patricia. Thank you for coming in so quickly. If you'll follow me, we can discuss this privately." She led me down a carpeted hallway, past a row of offices with frosted glass doors, to a small room at the end. Inside was a desk, 2 chairs, a window overlooking the street, and the faint hum of the building's HVAC system. On her desk sat a manila folder, a printout of what looked like an official document, and a yellow legal pad covered in handwritten notes. Patricia closed the door and gestured for me to sit. "Before we begin," she said, settling into her own chair, "I want to assure you that no access has been granted to your safety deposit box." The moment I identified discrepancies in the documentation, I halted the process and contacted you directly. "What kind of discrepancies?" Patricia opened the folder and slid the printout toward me. It was a death certificate. My name was typed at the top in official black letters. My date of birth, November 14th, 1987. My social security number. My home address. Cause of death, cardiac arrest. Date of death, March 8th, 6 days ago. The attending physician was listed as a Dr. Marcus Ellerby, with an address in Baltimore. I stared at the document. It looked real. The seal, the formatting, the signatures, all of it appeared legitimate at first glance. Whoever had created this had done their research. "I don't know this doctor," I said. "Neither does the Maryland Board of Physicians," Patricia replied. "At least, not at the address listed. I made a few calls while you were on your way." There's a Dr. Marcus Ellerby who practices internal medicine in Silver Spring, but he has no record of ever treating anyone named Natalie Graves, and his office address doesn't match what's on this certificate. So, it's completely fabricated. It appears so. The certificate was likely created using a template and filed with false information. It's disturbingly easy to do, unfortunately, if someone knows the right channels. I looked up from the document. How did you know something was wrong? Patricia leaned back in her chair. Her expression was calm, professional, but I could see something else beneath it, a quiet anger, carefully controlled. 3 things, she said. First, the timing. The certificate was dated 6 days ago, but there was no obituary in any local paper, no estate filing with the court, no probate notification sent to our office. When someone with significant assets passes away, there's usually a flurry of legal activity within the first 48 hours. Family members contact attorneys, notices get published, paperwork starts moving. In this case, there was nothing. And second, the behavior of the individual who submitted the documentation. She was insistent.
Rushed.
She wanted immediate access, same-day processing. She said she needed to inventory the contents for insurance purposes, and that time was of the essence. When I explained that our standard verification process takes 72 hours minimum, she became agitated, demanded to speak with the supervisor, threatened to take her business elsewhere. Patricia shook her head slightly, like someone recalling a particularly unpleasant interaction. In my experience, people who have just lost a loved one are usually patient.
Grief slows you down.
It makes you foggy, uncertain. This woman wasn't grieving. She was performing. And the third thing? Patricia met my eyes directly. She asked about the value of the contents before she asked about the access process. Most people, when they're dealing with a deceased family member's assets, want to know the logistics first. How does this work? What do I need to sign? Where do I go? She wanted to know what was in the box and how much it was worth. I sat back in my chair. My hands were trembling slightly, and I pressed them flat against my thighs to steady them. Where is she now? Patricia gestured toward the wall. Conference room B, down the hall. She's been told there's a delay in processing due to a system update, but she doesn't know I've contacted you. She doesn't know you're here. I stood up. I want to see her. Patricia raised an eyebrow. Ms. Graves, I should tell you, we've already contacted the Easton Police Department. An officer is on the way. Given the nature of the alleged fraud, I'd recommend letting them handle the initial interaction. These situations can become unpredictable.
I understand, I said.
But I need to see who did this. I need to look her in the face. Patricia studied me for a long moment. I don't know what she saw, determination, maybe, or something closer to desperation, but whatever it was, it seemed to satisfy her.
Follow me, she said.
Conference room B had a frosted glass door and a small window beside it. Through the distortion, I could see a figure sitting at the table inside, a woman with dark hair, tapping her fingers impatiently on the surface, checking her phone, glancing at the door every few seconds. I knew that silhouette. I'd known it my whole life. Patricia paused with her hand on the door handle. Are you ready? I nodded. She opened the door without knocking. Mrs. Mahoney, she said, there's been a development in your request. Bridget looked up. Her face was composed, expectant, the face of someone who believed everything was going according to plan, who had already mentally spent the money she was about to steal, who was counting down the minutes until she could walk out of this building with the keys to my grandmother's legacy. Then she saw me, and her face collapsed. Not into guilt, not into shame, into something rawer, shock first, then confusion, then a desperate scramble for control as her brain tried to process what her eyes were seeing.
Natalie, she said.
My name came out cracked, broken in the middle. What? How? Hi, Bridget. I stepped into the room. Patricia remained in the doorway, arms folded, watching. You look pretty good, I said, for someone attending my funeral. Bridget's mouth opened.
Closed.
Opened again. Her hands flattened against the table, like she was trying to stop the room from spinning. I don't. This isn't. There must be some mistake. I was told someone called me. The only mistake, I said, was thinking you could forge a death certificate, walk into a bank with my social security number, and not have anyone check. Her eyes darted to Patricia, then back to me. I watched her calculating, searching for an exit, a story, anything that might explain away what was happening. I didn't forge anything, she said. Her voice was steadier now, falling into a rhythm I recognized, the rhythm of someone constructing a lie in real time. I received documentation. I was contacted by a funeral home. They said you'd passed away suddenly, and that as your next of kin, I needed to. Which funeral home? She hesitated. Her fingers twitched against the table. I don't remember the name exactly. It was a Baltimore area code. They said, "You don't remember the name of the funeral home that told you your cousin was dead?" It happened so fast. I was in shock. I wasn't thinking clearly. You were clear enough to drive to Easton, walk into this bank, present a forged death certificate, and demand immediate access to a safety deposit box worth over $1 million. That seems pretty clear-headed to me. Bridget's jaw tightened. The mask was starting to slip. "This is harassment," she said. "I came here in good faith, trying to handle a family matter, trying to do the right thing, and now I'm being accused of fraud," I said. "Identity theft. Forgery. Filing a false death certificate with a financial institution. Attempted grand larceny. That safety deposit box contains our grandmother's entire jewelry collection, Bridget. 147 pieces appraised at $1.2 million.
You know that.
You've known that since the day the will was read." Her face reddened. The flush started at her neck and climbed, spreading across her cheeks like a stain. "That jewelry should have been mine," she hissed. The words came out low, venomous. "Grandma promised it to me. She showed it to me when I was 8 years old and said it would be mine someday. She held up that diamond clip, the Art Deco one with the emeralds, and she said, 'Bridget, this belonged to my mother, and someday it will belong to you.' She promised. She changed her mind. Because you manipulated her." "I didn't manipulate anyone. I visited her. I sat with her. I listened to her stories about the jewelry, about where each piece came from, about the women who wore them before her. That's all. I just showed up." "And I didn't." Bridget's voice cracked. "I showed up every Sunday for 15 years. I drove her to doctors, dentists' eye appointments. I organized her pills, cleaned her gutters, sat through her endless complaints about the neighbors. I did everything, and you breezed in twice a year for holidays, and somehow that was enough. It wasn't about the visits, Bridget. Then what was it about?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and I saw something I hadn't expected to see.
Pain.
Not the manufactured pain of someone playing victim. Real pain. The kind that sits in your chest for years, calcifying into something hard and permanent. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I don't know why Grandma made the choice she made. Maybe she saw something in me that reminded her of herself. Maybe she didn't like Kyle. Maybe she was just tired and picked the path of least resistance. I don't know, and I never will, because she didn't explain it and now she's gone." Bridget's eyes were wet. She wiped at them angrily. "You don't deserve it," she said. "You never did." "Maybe not. But it's mine anyway. That's how inheritance works. It's not about deserving. It's about being chosen." The door opened behind Patricia. 2 police officers stepped into the room, a man in his 40s with a mustache and a woman about my age with her hair pulled back in a tight bun. Both wore the calm, watchful expressions of people who had seen domestic disputes before and knew how quickly they could escalate. "Mrs. Bridget Mahoney," the female officer said. Bridget didn't respond. She was still looking at me, and I realized with a start that she was crying now. Real tears, streaming down her face, dripping off her chin onto the table. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to come with us. You're being detained for questioning regarding suspected forgery, identity fraud, and attempted theft." "I was just trying to get what was mine," Bridget whispered. "I was just trying to fix it." The officers moved forward. One of them gently took her arm, guiding her to stand. She didn't resist. All the fight had drained out of her, replaced by something that looked almost like relief, as if being caught had finally released her from a burden she'd been carrying alone. As they led her toward the door, She looked at me one last time. Kyle said it would work, she said. He said people do it all the time. File the papers, claim the assets, disappear before anyone notices. He said by the time you found out, we'd be in Costa Rica. Costa Rica? We bought tickets. Open-ended. He said we could start over. Build something new. She laughed, a hollow, broken sound. I believed him. I actually believed him. The officers paused, letting her finish. We're broke, Natalie. We've been broke for 2 years. Kyle's development deal collapsed. The investors sued. We're 3 months behind on the mortgage, 4 months behind on the car, and the credit cards are maxed. I didn't know what else to do. I didn't see any other way. She was shaking now, her whole body trembling like a leaf in a storm. You could have asked, I said quietly. Bridget looked at me with an expression that was equal parts disbelief and contempt. Asked? Ask the cousin who stole my inheritance? Ask the woman who took everything that should have been mine? I would have helped you. I don't want your help. I don't want your charity. I want what belongs to me. It doesn't belong to you, Bridget. It never did. She had no response to that. The officers tightened their grip on her arms and guided her through the door, down the hallway, and out of sight. Patricia exhaled slowly. Are you all right? She asked. I wasn't sure how to answer. The investigation took 6 weeks. What emerged was worse than I'd imagined. Kyle had been the architect of the scheme. He'd found the contact who could produce the forged death certificate, a man in Wilmington, Delaware, who ran a small printing operation that specialized in fraudulent documents. The certificate cost $3,000, paid for with a credit card that was already over its limit. The plan had been meticulous. File the death certificate with the bank. Claim the safety deposit box contents as next of kin. Liquidate the jewelry through a network of discreet buyers Kyle had cultivated during his real estate days. Convert everything to cash. Fly to Costa Rica on the open-ended tickets they'd purchased 3 weeks earlier. Start new lives under new names in a country with no extradition treaty. They'd even researched how long it would take for me to be declared legally dead if no one contested it. 7 years, apparently. Plenty of time to disappear. But they'd made 2 mistakes. First, they'd underestimated Patricia Hollowell. In their planning, they'd assumed the bank would follow standard procedure, accept the documentation, process the request, hand over the keys. They hadn't accounted for a branch manager with 30 years of experience and an instinct for detecting lies. Second, they'd chosen a safety deposit box that required verification. First Regional Bank, like many institutions, had implemented enhanced security measures after a wave of elder financial abuse cases in the early 2000s. Any request involving deceased customers triggered an automatic verification protocol that included contacting the customer directly if a phone number was on file. My phone number was on file, and Patricia had called. Bridget was charged with forgery in the first degree, identity fraud, attempted theft over $100,000, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes. Kyle was charged with the same counts, plus an additional charge for procuring fraudulent documents. The prosecutor offered Bridget a plea deal, plead guilty to forgery and conspiracy, and he dropped the identity fraud and theft charges. She'd served 2 years in a minimum security facility, followed by 5 years of probation. She took it. Kyle fought the charges. He hired a defense attorney from D.C. who cost more money than they had left, and he went to trial claiming he'd been manipulated by Bridget, that she'd conceived the plan and pressured him into participating, that he was a victim of her desperation. The jury didn't believe him. They returned a guilty verdict in 4 hours. He was sentenced to 7 years. I didn't attend either sentencing hearing. I didn't need to see my cousin in an orange jumpsuit, didn't need to watch her be led away in handcuffs, didn't need the satisfaction of hearing a judge pronounce her punishment. What I needed was quiet. For 3 months after the arrests, I did almost nothing. I went to work at the museum, cataloging maritime artifacts and writing grant applications. I came home to my apartment in St. Michael's, made dinner, read books, went to bed. I didn't talk about what had happened except when necessary, statements to police, meetings with prosecutors, conversations with Patricia about the security of my accounts. I didn't talk about how it felt to know my cousin had declared me dead. I didn't talk about lying awake at night, replaying the confrontation in the conference room, hearing her say you don't deserve it over and over in my head. I didn't talk about the dreams, strange, fragmented dreams where I attended my own funeral and watched Bridget cry at my graveside, and woke up unsure whether the tears had been real or a performance. Some wounds don't heal because you talk about them. Some wounds heal because you stop picking at them and let time do its work. 6 months after Bridget went to prison, I received a letter. It arrived on a Thursday, mixed in with bills and catalogs and a reminder from my dentist about an upcoming cleaning. The envelope was plain white. The return address a series of numbers I didn't recognize until I looked more closely and saw the words, Maryland Correctional Institution for Women. I almost threw it away, but I didn't. I took it to my kitchen table, made a cup of tea, and opened it with the same care I'd use handling a fragile artifact, slowly, deliberately, prepared for it to crumble in my hands. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, covered in handwriting I recognized from birthday cards and Christmas notes stretching back 30 years. Natalie. Asterisk, I don't expect you to forgive me. I'm not even sure I want you to. Forgiveness feels too easy, like something people say when they want to move on without doing the actual work of understanding what went wrong. Asterisk. Asterisk, what I did was wrong. I knew it was wrong when I did it. I told myself it was justified, that I'd been cheated, that Grandma had made a mistake, that I was just correcting an error the universe had made. But that was a story I needed to believe, so I could look at myself in the mirror. Asterisk. Asterisk, the truth is simpler and uglier. I was jealous. I'd been jealous of you my whole life. You were always the one everyone noticed, the one Grandma asked about, the one Mom compared me to when she thought I couldn't hear. Natalie got straight A's. Natalie got into that program. Natalie's doing so well. And I was just there. Average. Forgettable. The one who showed up and did the work but never got the gold star. Asterisk. Asterisk, I thought if I had the jewelry, it would prove something. Prove that Grandma loved me. Even if she had a strange way of showing it. Prove that I mattered. Prove that I existed. Asterisk. Asterisk, it didn't prove anything, obviously. It just proved that I was capable of doing terrible things when I felt desperate enough. Asterisk. Asterisk, Kyle is gone. He filed for divorce 3 weeks after the sentencing. His lawyer sent papers to the prison, if you can believe that. 22 years of marriage, and he couldn't even deliver them in person. I guess that tells me everything I need to know about what I meant to him. Asterisk. Asterisk, I have a lot of time to think in here. Too much, probably. But one thing I keep coming back to is something Grandma said to me once, years ago, when I was 12 or 13 and complaining that you got more attention at Thanksgiving. Asterisk. Asterisk, she said, Bridget, attention isn't given. It's earned. Asterisk. Asterisk, I didn't understand what she meant. I thought she was being cruel, dismissing my feelings like they didn't matter. But I think I understand now. She wasn't saying I didn't deserve attention. She was saying that the kind of attention I wanted, the kind that comes with love and respect and being truly seen, isn't something you can demand. You have to build it. Earn it. One moment at a time. Asterisk. Asterisk, I never built it. I just waited for it to be handed to me, and when it wasn't, I got angry. Asterisk. Asterisk, I'm not asking for anything from you. I'm not asking you to visit, or write back, or forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. What I did. Who I was. Who I became. Asterisk. Asterisk, maybe that's worth something. Maybe it isn't. Asterisk. Bridget. I read the letter 3 times. Then I folded it carefully, put it back in the envelope, and placed it in the drawer of my desk where I keep things I'm not ready to throw away but don't want to see every day. Forgiveness isn't a switch you flip. It's not a moment of grace that descends from heaven and washes away all the hurt. It's a door you open slowly, 1 inch at a time, and some days you push it open a little wider, and some days you let it swing closed again. I wasn't ready to open it yet, but I hadn't locked it either. A year after everything happened, I drove out to Grandma Dorothea's house in Easton. I hadn't been there in months. After the estate was settled, I'd hired a property manager to handle the maintenance, a retired contractor named Wallace who'd known Grandma for 40 years and had helped her replace the porch railing back in 2015. He kept the lawn mowed, the gutters clean, the old Victorian standing proud on its corner lot like it had for the past 117 years. But the house itself felt frozen. Grandma's furniture still arranged the way she'd left it. Her books still lined up on the shelves in alphabetical order by author. Her reading glasses still sitting on the end table beside her favorite chair, as if she'd just stepped out for a moment and would be back any minute. I walked through the room slowly, touching things. The velvet arm of the settee in the parlor. The brass handle on the china hutch. The crystal vase she'd kept on the windowsill, empty now but still catching the afternoon light in a way that made rainbows dance across the wall. In her bedroom, I found the jewelry box she'd kept on her dresser. Not the valuable pieces, which had always been in the bank, but the everyday things. A string of freshwater pearls she wore to church. A gold bangle with a tiny dent from when she'd dropped it in the kitchen sink. A cameo brooch that had belonged to her mother, which she wore every Sunday for 40 years. I picked up the brooch and turned it over in my hands. The shell was cool against my palm, the carving so delicate I could see every curl of the woman's hair. On the back, in faded script, someone had engraved 2 words for Dorothea. I didn't know who had given it to her. I didn't know the story behind it, whether it was a gift from a suitor, a token from a friend, a piece she'd inherited from someone whose name had been lost to time. But I knew it had mattered to her, mattered enough to keep it close, to wear it week after week, to let it become part of who she was. That's what inheritance really is. Not money. Not property. Not jewelry locked in a vault. It's trust. Grandma trusted me with her things because she trusted me with her memory. She believed I would care for what she'd built, honor what she'd loved, carry forward something worth keeping. Bridget never understood that. She saw dollar signs where I saw history. She saw assets where I saw artifacts. She thought she was being cheated out of wealth when really she was being excluded from a relationship she'd never invested in. I put the brooch back in the box and closed the lid. Then I made a decision. 2 weeks later, I met with my estate attorney, a woman named Grace Okonkwo who had taken over Theodore Marsh's practice when he retired, and asked her to help me draft a new will. I left the house in Easton to the Talbot County Historical Society with instructions that it be preserved as a museum and educational center for Eastern Shore heritage. I left the land and tract to the Chesapeake Bay Foundation to be maintained as a wildlife sanctuary in perpetuity. I left a significant portion of the brokerage accounts to the Maritime Museum where I'd worked for 8 years, with a request that they use the funds to expand their oral history project documenting the lives of Chesapeake watermen. And the jewelry collection, the $1.2 million in antique pieces that had started all of this, I left to the Maryland Historical Society with instructions that it be displayed as part of a permanent exhibit on decorative arts of the Chesapeake region. Except for one piece. The cameo brooch, the one engraved for Dorothea, I left to Bridget's daughter, Molly. Molly was 14 years old. She'd had nothing to do with what her mother did. She was an innocent cod in the wreckage of her parents' choices, and she deserved something beautiful to remind her that her family wasn't only about scandal and prison sentences. I also established a trust in Molly's name, $75,000, to be released when she turned 25, with a letter explaining who her great-grandmother was and what the brooch had meant to her. Grace raised an eyebrow when I explained this part. "You're giving a significant gift to the daughter of the woman who tried to have you declared dead," she said. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." "May I ask why?" I thought about it. About Grandma's house on Washington Street, standing empty but still proud. About the jewelry that had passed through generations of hands before reaching mine. About the complicated inheritance of family, not just the things we leave behind, but the stories, the wounds, the moments of grace we choose to offer even when they aren't earned. Because it was never really mine, I said. I was just taking care of it. Grace studied me for a long moment. Then she nodded and made a note on her legal pad. "That's a good answer," she said. I still drive by First Regional Bank sometimes, on my way to the museum or the grocery store, or nowhere in particular. The building looks the same. Green shutters. Brick facade. The small parking lot where I sat in my car that Tuesday afternoon, trying to make sense of a phone call that had turned my world upside down. Patricia Hollowell retired last spring. I sent her a card and a gift, a small watercolor painting of a Chesapeake skipjack by a local artist whose work I'd admired for years. She sent a note back that said, simply, "Thank you for trusting me to do my job. Most people don't, Bridget finished her sentence 8 months ago. I heard from Grace that she moved to North Carolina, took a job at a nonprofit that helps formerly incarcerated women find employment and housing. Whether that's true, I don't know. We haven't spoken since the day in the conference room, and I'm not sure we ever will. But I think about her sometimes. About the little girl who taught me to catch blue crabs with a chicken neck on a string, patient and laughing in the summer sun. About the teenager who French braided my hair before prom because my mother was too sick to help. About the woman who stood next to me at my father's funeral and held my hand without saying a word. About the person who walked into a bank and told a stranger that I was dead because she couldn't see any other path forward. People do terrible things when they're desperate. That doesn't excuse the things they do. It doesn't erase the harm, doesn't heal the wounds, doesn't make forgiveness automatic or easy. But it explains them. And sometimes, understanding is the closest thing to peace we're going to get. Last month, I finally opened the safety deposit box. It had been sitting there for almost 2 years, untouched since Grandma's death. I'd been meaning to inventory it, to have the pieces reappraised, to decide what to do with them. But every time I scheduled an appointment with the bank, something came up: work, life, the ordinary excuses we use to avoid the things that frighten us. Patricia's replacement was a young man named Derek who had been briefed on the history of the account. He was professional, efficient, and careful not to mention the incident that had made my name memorable in the bank's records. He led me to a private room, brought the box, and left me alone. I lifted the lid. Inside were layers of velvet pouches, each one labeled in Grandma's careful handwriting. I opened them one by one, spreading the contents across the table like a museum exhibit of my own family's history. Victorian mourning brooches with tiny compartments for locks of hair. Edwardian rings with sapphires the color of deep water. Art Deco diamond clips that sparkled under the fluorescent lights like captured stars. A Georgian necklace of seed pearls that Grandma said had been worn by my great-great-grandmother on her wedding day. I sat there for an hour, touching each piece, reading the labels, imagining the women who had worn them, the hands that had clasped the brooches, the necks that had supported the necklaces, the lives that had unfolded around these small, beautiful objects. And I understood finally what Grandma had been trying to give me. Not wealth, not status, not a weapon to use against my cousin or anyone else. She was giving me a responsibility, a duty to remember. A chain of custody stretching back generations and forward into an unknown future. I was just one link in that chain. One set of hands holding these objects for a while before passing them on. The jewelry didn't belong to me any more than it had belonged to Grandma or her mother or the women before them. It belonged to time. I packed the pieces back into their pouches, closed the lid, and told Derek I was ready for the armored transport to the Historical Society. He looked surprised. "You're donating all of it?" "All of it," I said. "It's where it belongs." If someone in your family declared you dead to steal from you, could you ever forgive them? Would you want to? Or would you do what I did? Hold the door open without walking through it, and let time decide what happens next? Tell me in the comments. And if you want more stories where the truth refuses to stay buried, hit subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.